Okay, Sigfús, welcome to the Icelandic Roots podcast. Thank you for meeting me here. We are recording this live in Reykjavik. Okay, so Sigfús, you are the 2024 Snorri West Alumni Intern.
Yep, that's correct.
I would like you then to maybe tell us about your experience visiting North America on the Snorri West program and what got you interested in these connections.
Okay, so I'll just start with one of the reasons that I actually have a relative living in Michigan.
Okay.
And it's the half sister of my grandfather. So they had like the same mother but different fathers. So his sister actually was left in I think it was in Canada, and then moved down south to the States as he grew older. It was during that time that, like in the early 20th century, so 1905 or 15, I'm not quite sure, but yeah, so she's like I said, the half sister of my grandfather, and my dad was really interested in this because knowing that we have relatives living in the States was really fascinating, and with like his examining like the genealogy and like tracking, and he did a lot of research work on his own, he was like emailing some lion clubs, and the problem with like tracking down relatives that are female is that because if you're like female, you often take the names of your spouse, like so you have your maiden name, and then you have like the last name, and the last name changes, and everything just goes to like
that's a lot different than what you're used to in Iceland.
So that was really hard to know, because you had to track down like wedding certificates and whatnot. But he ended up talking to Jerome, who lives in Chicago, and I actually got to meet him during my 2022 trip there, and that was really nice.
Yeah.
But before that, back in 2013 or 14, we actually went to Michigan and visited them. So, and it's this like close tie between us, and it like my grandfather's sister. So would that be like
your grandfather's sister would be like your great aunt?
Yeah, my great aunt. So my great aunt had the stories we've heard from our relatives in Michigan about are really like interesting. So, some mafia-related shenanigans in Chicago and stuff like that. Really interesting.
Storied history.
Yeah, but the thing is, there is such an interesting aspect of history, because Guðlaug Árnadóttir, my great-grandmother, so the mother of my grandfather, she and her husband at the time tried to emigrate to the States, or Canada to be precise, but they were turned away from that because he was too sick and she was pregnant at the time. So they get shipped back and forth. I think they returned to Iceland after having left some of their kids in like foster care in Canada, and my great uncle, he stayed with some people in Canada. I can't remember the name of the place, but it's one of the ones close to, I think it's Gimli. It wasn't in Gimli, but we're getting a bit.
Lots of other areas in those regions.
I think it was like River or something, but
Riverton maybe.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
So they. I'm getting lost in the sauce. It's so many names and details that I'm not really I don't have my notes.
Yeah. Well, this is actually relevant because this is how it goes. Unless you have all of these like genealogical traces all put out before you, it really is easy to mismatch who's who and what's what. Like if you are sitting down and asking me specifically where my relatives came from in Iceland, who is related to who, etc., I really am hopeless to explain all of those off of memory if I don't have Icelandic roots or some sort of genealogical charts. There are some people, such as Nelson Gerard, who we have interviewed on the podcast, who just has like a photographic memory for these things, but it's also because he's been steeped in this history and through the books for like maybe decades now, right? So some people are just really immersed in that, but for the most part, it's such a confusing and mismatched history.
Yeah, but to get to the point that I was saying, I met my great-uncle's foster sister back in 2022, and she actually went to Iceland to meet my grandfather in the 70s or the 80s, back when he was alive, of course. So, yeah, that was a really nice, what would we say, like family reunion. But yeah, so the history is that, like, she tries to emigrate, they rejected her. So on like the second return trip to Iceland, because they were like sent back and forth because they didn't have any money to pay the transit, and they had to. It was just it was a messy affair. But she ends up giving birth to twins, and in my grandfather's biography, he talks about the two of them, Jón Albert and Jakob Lindahl. So Albert was named after the captain of the ship, but Jakob Lindahl, he is supposed to have died, like he was a stillborn, but the dates in like Icelandic book state that he isn't like pronounced dead until like the 18th of December the year after. So, but my grandfather's account of the story was that Jakob died on the return trip. So, and then later her husband dies and meets another man in the east. Well, she just works for some farmers. So they end up. She stays and she gets pregnant. Has my grandfather. They don't really have the money to keep him, so he is sent into like foster at another farm town, and it's a whole interesting story, and I'm not doing it enough justice, but they did actually, like the Ríkisútvarpið did radio show about his like adventures. It's based on his biography that he wrote, Dömu, Draugar og Dátinmenn. So that just recalls, and the history is all of and he was a really interesting man, because he ends up like creating a bus company in the east, and interesting life, and it was during that era of like the Marshall Plan where the American money was going in, and you kind of see how the society changes from this agricultural society to a more modern one could say,
more industrial.
Practices. So that's interesting just to see how like the ideology of Iceland changes in his time.
Yes, and very interesting stories, and again, always a lot to keep track of. But again, the question remains: why is this interesting to you? And it sounded like your dad did a lot of this like work, finding the relative in North America. But why have you continued this, and why is it fascinating to you?
Okay. Let me think for a moment.
I mean, it is a deep question. I tend to like to ask this of people, and I actually don't know myself if you were to... Well, I guess if I could answer my own question, I would say it's a bit different, I think, being a North American and then trying to seek out your Icelandic ancestry, because it seems like this gateway into this culture, and coming here as more than just a tourist and actually understanding and getting to know the people here by having Icelandic ancestry. So that's, I would say, is my short answer for a why. but also it's just genuinely interesting to know your ancestry and where you came from.
No, I mean, like a part of it is probably has to do to the fact that I'm not sure how the people in the States have it, because it's always the question of like ancestry and like where do you come from and whatnot. But I think having like knowing that you had a relative that moved to Vesturheimur and settled there, but you don't know who they are or what they are. Maybe there's like a sense in the family ethos that is like, oh, there's a part of us missing.
Right.
But that might just be my sentimentality talking, because of course there are like other relatives that is in the same branch of the family.
Yeah.
They didn't seem to have the same interest in the genealogy, which is, I don't know, it's always the question of, like the reason why it's some people want to need this part of them to understand the part of themselves, another don't. But another part was that it's kind of tied into the history of my grandfather, in a sense that he died before I was born, so I never really got to meet him. I only know him through like his book and so in a sense, like meeting my great uncle's foster sister, that kind of ties into the thing of like, maybe I'm discovering some aspects of the family that was lost to us. It's a tricky question because there is no clear right or wrong answer. I just find it fascinating that there is like a part of family history that was lost, but now it isn't, because the two arms of the family have been reconnected.
Yeah. I've heard that sentiment as well from other Icelanders, that there was like this sort of mystery branch of their family that was, like you said, kind of like disconnected or lost. And I think even more so because once you get to North America, I mean, it's a melting pot. So I think from a maybe European perspective, having relatives that emigrated to North America, it would be easy to feel like they've just gotten lost in that culture. And it might make it even more interesting to like try to figure out, where did they go? Who were they? What ended up of them?
This is the thing that I learned when I went to the States, and it's part of the cultural difference between like Canada and the States is that you in the States you have this cultural melting pot where people are like creating a new identity for themselves. And I remember my father telling me about like people just changed the last name because they wanted to become American.
Yeah, Americanized.
But in like Canada, they have they don't have the idea of the cultural melting pot, but rather the cultural mosaic. So every ethnicity has like the right to be their own. So I think, and that's one of the interesting things, like because me and Erla back in 2022 went to both Gimli and Mountain, and there is this difference between the
festivals,
the festivals as well as the people,
the culture in general.
I mean, like the University of Manitoba has like this huge archive of the Icelandic documents. They have like when they first came in, and there's just so much. They did a really good job in the University of Manitoba, as well as having a lot of like the history in Winnipeg, for example. When we went on a tour with Stefan, was just really great, and it's and I mean you kind of understand why people left it, because like seeing the houses that we went to Hekla.
Okay,
in Hekla, like the houses there are like huge compared to like the cramped living spaces we have here in Iceland.
Yeah, sure.
But so it's an interesting.
It is certainly, without a doubt, interesting. And yeah, so you went and explored all of that area, went to both of the festivals. Did you go anywhere else in Canada or the US during that Snorri trip?
I stayed, I think it was about a week in Washington Island, and that's an area that is really has a history or a tie to Chester, who created or invented the transformer, the power transformer.
Okay.
So he's kind of an Icelandic Gatsby.
Huh.
Yeah, he's like Richard Purrington, our host on the island, was a really knowledgeable fellow on both the Icelandic immigrants that ended up there in like the Icelandic castle, which the house was called, but it's sadly, I think the people that they called it the Icelandic castle to make fun of it. It wasn't a castle. It was
I see. It was like
derogative term for the place.
Yeah. I see.
So, but people lived there. There was some settlers there, but not many. And but the main attraction was on Rock Island, and that was like Chester's grand palace. And I'm talking about maybe not a palace per se, but it's a huge house.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say it's like a stone mansion, a palace in my eyes. Really beautiful building, but you kind of get because here's the interesting thing, in like Icelandic schools, there isn't, in my opinion, talked enough about like the innovators that did something great. Like because I never heard about.
So it's not like that national pride of like Icelanders who went elsewhere but went on to do great things. Because certainly, well, I would say, I mean, Canada's obviously a younger nation, but whenever there is like someone born in Canada, no matter where they live, or like artists, musicians, if they're in the States or something, we always cling to that. Oh yeah, they're Canadian. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think like it's a funny story about Chester, because he lived in, if I remember correctly, Chicago, and had like a huge library there. And then when I think it was during the Second World War, that he decided that he was so afraid that the Germans would bomb Chicago that he moved all his library to Rock Island, which is in Wisconsin, like close to Washington Island. And for me personally, like Washington Island was a really beautiful country and or an island, and I managed to get lost there, of course.
Because maybe there was real forests. Yeah, you weren't used to that.
No,
being Icelandic.
One tree looks the same to me. Yeah, but it was fun. Getting lost, exploring. The people there were nice. I think I was just biking around, and I ended up having to ask some guy who was he was like a musical producer, and it was so interesting. But anyways, ended up was a bit late for the meeting at 9, so I decided to wake up early and go for a bicycle ride around the island. And I thought, if I just cycle long enough, I'll eventually see the lake, which I did, but it wasn't like, forests are really disorienting.
Yeah, especially when they're tall enough that when you stand up, you can't see your way out. To bug on the old Icelandic joke.
But it was really interesting though, because as I was like cycling down the street, I saw this like this church, which was created or built in like the old Norse style.
Wow. We're
talking about like Norwegian church, and it's if I remember correctly, it's called like Stavkirkja and they built the community on Washington Island, and they used just the same techniques as the Norwegians would have done.
And so this is like using wood. Not the turf style.
No, it was wood, so it's maybe not connected to Iceland in that sense.
Yeah, but still Old Norse.
Old Norse, and I just was really fascinated by that. So I took a walk around the church, and then it was fascinating. And then, of course, our host decided to show us that, and I was like, I've been there. Really fun, really fun. I had a lovely time in Chicago and Washington Island. So, But yeah, so yeah, Washington Island was a really fun part of the trip, and just like learning the story about Chester was interesting in of itself, because like I said, it's something that you don't see every day, and I didn't know that Iceland was responsible for creating like the power converter.
Yeah, right. No kidding. Yeah, I myself actually am always surprised of, I can't really think off the top of my mind, but every time I'm, investigating these things, or now having spent time in Iceland over the last few weeks, I'm always discovering like new connections. This person did this, or here's a poet or a writer that I hadn't heard of before. And it's just but I think that's true of like really any culture. Any group of humans is just going to do so much more than you expect, right? And there's all these connections once you really dig into it. But maybe Iceland's a bit more unique because you can really trace these connections better. You can really like track down who's who, what they do, where they went, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, they kept really good records on, and that's why we have like Icelandic book that can go like. But I think like the Icelandic Roots has that's just Icelandic book on steroids.
Yes, that's a good. They should use that in the marketing maybe. But yeah, it's a really fantastic resource, of course. And I think for like anybody, like of course it's a starting point to have Icelandic ancestry, but anyone interested in the history and the culture up to present day is just such so much information there that's sort of consolidated inside of Icelandic Roots. So maybe we could look ahead to the future a bit, and I'd be curious as to what you would aspire to achieve or hope to learn more about during your upcoming time in North America for the alumni internship.
Well, here's the thing. I just want to really, like the Snorri program did me, I feel that I'm indebted to the program, so I thought it would be a great way to give a part of myself back to the community. But I'm actually looking forward to meeting the people that or the friends that I made along the way, and I just like revisiting old ties and to see how the people are getting on, really. And I mean, I'm always interested in learning more about the culture, and when I last went to North America, we got so much information that it was like, my goodness. It was some information overload in some cases, but it was fun though. It really, it's fun to have this knowledge of the Icelandic descent, and like I said, I learned a lot, for example, in Chicago about the Scandinavian community there, and how they got along with other people and built the universities and whatnot. And I think that's one of the things about the Snorri program, like going to the States, you get to experience American culture as well, and that's I think that's one of the really important aspect, is that it's so easy in this well-connected reality of us to just read something online and just think it's the truth, but like going there and actually meeting the places, it kind of helps us understand the world better. So that's maybe one of the goals of my going as an intern, is to just educate people about Iceland and the history there. But here's the funny bit, I'm an English major, so it's like, he knows a lot about Lord Byron, but what about like Icelandic poetry? And well, Icelandic poets. Here's the thing though, that like I really enjoyed that, like Mountain has a like Stefán G. Stephensen
Yeah.
and Cowan. They
Mhm.
were like
Yeah.
poets. And Cowan wrote like a really, really beautiful poems. Of course, he was like an alcoholic, so that's probably
Hey, what makes you say that? Oh, maybe all of his poems were about beer or something?
yeah. But his poems were like really beautiful, and even though he didn't, I think his story is really beautiful and just sad in a way, but Baggalútur, an Icelandic band, they actually went to North Dakota and with some of his like poems, like sung them, so like transformed it
Into songs.
into songs,
Yeah,
but they used
okay.
like the same text,
Yeah.
and that's like beautiful. And I find Cowan to be a really interesting fellow because he emigrated from Akureyri,
Yeah.
and like and here's the thing, like he grows up in a broken household that like his father was an alcoholic and manages to lose the house, and he just ends up his story is rich, like, and
Yeah.
you can understand why he would leave Iceland behind and go off to just see go for looking for a better life, which is something that I think is quite natural to us to just if we're unhappy, we should what is stopping us from leaving, you know?
Seek new horizons.
Yeah. And here's the thing, and I think because of course there was some prejudice towards the people that left for the States, just like, oh, they can't handle the Icelandic weather and they won't eat the rotten shark. Oh, what a bunch of Nancy's or something. But like I stated earlier, they often ended up living in living a life that was better quality than back in Iceland because like I said, the society back then, it was just poor agriculture society, which didn't have a lot of opportunities. And I'm thinking for innovative people that, like Chester, for example, I doubt that he would be able to have like created or invented the power transformer in the Icelandic society. So, and but maybe we're going a bit off topic. But
No, that's definitely, it is very interesting to consider. And you're right, you mentioned earlier like that transformative period where Iceland sort of industrialized quite quickly around World War II. And I think in general, if you go back to any time point in Iceland's history, you would have been like, to imagine what Iceland has become today, it would have been such like fantastical thinking, but I guess North America too, for that matter, just the development of societies in general. And maybe in this sort of nationalistic pride, we can say that there's just something in the Icelanders' DNA that allowed them to persevere. But you're right, there was many different factors that would have led people to emigrate, and that's something that I'm interested in too, is thinking about, were you leaving a broken household? Were you in love with someone else and you wanted to actually leave your family behind and pursue a love affair? I think those stories are less written in the history books than is, actually represented, yeah?
Yeah, there's a saying from one of my favorite podcasts. It's like a history podcast because it's really easy to when you get like such a large amount of numbers and you see like the lists in with the ships. The manifest. Is it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the ship's manifest of the people that are like leaving Iceland to go live abroad. It's like
just numbers.
Yeah, but behind each of those names is like a story that that might be lost to time or whatnot. But it's people just tend to get 1,000 people left, and but there is this story behind each and every one, which was fascinating.
And sometimes those stories were captured in poems, which I think was at the time like the best medium. Even today, we have all this technology, and I can video record my thoughts and emotions every single day. We can record, unfiltered conversations through podcasts. But even so, like humans we kind of suck at expressing ourselves. You know, we oftentimes don't say our deepest, truest emotions. So even today, I think poetry can sometimes only be the way we can get anywhere remotely close to actually expressing what we mean and how we feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's the problem with language. You can't really express yourself. No one is able to, you know, understand what you're going through, no matter how you say it, because it's like the human experience is so different and whatnot. But we're getting too philosophical, I'm afraid. That's I tend to do that a lot, so you have to excuse me.
Well, maybe your answer to the question is you hope to achieve and learn more through philosophical explorations when you return to North America. It was very interesting what you said, though, about experiencing American culture.
Yep.
And I think that's actually a really good point, because unless you go through a more educational experience like what you went through, going to Canada and the United States, I would imagine being anyone from a different country, or maybe just specifically from any European country, I think America often looks like this kind of weird Hollywood version. You either know it through Hollywood, through music, or through politics, and those are just like caricatures of what actual life there is. So I think that's really interesting for you to describe, like going there through this, you experienced American culture in a deeper, more realistic sense, actually getting to understand the people instead of just going there as a tourist.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, back when me and my father visited our relatives in Michigan, of course, you get this image like fed to you from like the news and like the media. Yeah. It's like they're painting a picture of North America, which isn't true in the sense that like the people the people are more friendly than they're depicted to be in that sense. You know, it's not all just like Ted Bundy's and whatnot. But like there are just, I think the problem is like the good side of the news isn't shown. It's the
It's if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Right. So sensationalized all the time.
Yeah. So that's one of the problems. But just visiting the States and Canada and just seeing it for yourself, you kind of just see America through unfiltered glasses. That's my point. So that's like I said, one of the reasons why I love going there is just you see it unfiltered. There are no like tinted glasses as you're like looking at society from.
Yeah. And can sometimes show you too, like in your example, that you yourself actually had relatives, people related to you that also helped build this society. So whatever Canada and the United States is today, that's built through some connections that you actually personally have through relatives. And so I think that's also important to see, and highlighting that we are actually all connected.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, like this is what I learned during my visit in Winnipeg when I was talking to Stefan and, like I said, Robbie and Ben. They kind of told me about when I was in Winnipeg, I got like got the knowledge about how the Icelandic people, they were actually quite a popular workforce because of the other Europeans that came there. They were ones that were like knew how to read, which was like a huge thing back in the day because of, and that's just the culture I think of, like sitting by in the torf houses and just reading the sagas and reminiscing about the good old days when you were a Viking and chasing some Irish people. Anyways, but that's the thing, and there is of course also a sense of like racism that happened, like, and that's really just calling the Icelanders ghoulies was like a derogative term. Derogative term.
Derogative.
Yeah, but it kind of makes sense. All like really white people dressed in like black coming to like you just want to read the books, you know. But yeah, they were really. in demand because, like I said, they knew how to read. So there is some aspects of Icelandic culture that really help them maybe assimilate better into the society. I'm not sure, but
yeah,
I'm not a
anthropologist.
Anthropologist, thank you. Not an anthropologist, so
Yeah.
my yeah, don't quote me on much of it, but like I said, I learned a lot in the Snorri program, and that's like because I'm starting to become a teacher, and like I remember a lot of the knowledge that was imparted on me by the people we met. Like Stefan was a freaking treasure trove of knowledge, and with the Icelandic James Bond, that was like a really really interesting talk. And I mean, just you have to get him on this podcast.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, okay, you just mentioned that you're trying to become a teacher or working towards that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm finishing my teaching degree in July, so well, I'm finished now. I'm just waiting for the grades to come in.
Yeah, okay.
I have a really special system to know like the names of the students. It's you put like an Excel sheet that you have in your computer, and that's like okay, and you just base it around like the seating position that they get in, and I'm like okay, this guy, and then it's just
so you're labeling the desks where they seat
in the Excel.
Yeah, so that you can see it. Yeah, that's an interesting. I'm talking about names and remembering names of relatives. Yeah, it'd be important to know all the names of your students in class. So that's a good start as a teacher, that you're getting that packed.
Yeah, I mean, I got a really nice feedback from my supervising teacher. So, yeah, and it's always something really fun to help the youth, you know?
Yeah, and would you plan then to like just work and teach in Iceland? Would that be your goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, it's the thought has been to like go abroad, but it's just
there's such rich history and stuff to teach here. And you said you're like English major, so is this what you would like to teach, English?
Yeah, of course. English is it's like the lingua franca of businesses and European Union, even though that like Britain.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, so the European Union, which the UK is no longer a part of, but English is still like the kind of baseline standard language. That's very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be France. I met with the consular. He's like an ambassador from the EU, but not technically the ambassador, because that would be like, it's the whole political word game. But he told us that when he was starting out, he would have to talk French with a bunch of Englishmen, just so, because that at that time French was the lingua franca of the European Union. But here's the thing, and that's what I love about the language. English, for example, you can go to England and go to East London and West London, you'll be like, I don't understand the word you're saying, because they have like the Cockney rhyme, and really interesting how just languages evolve with time. And here's the thing with like Icelandic, and that's really much to do just with geography. Which is that they're so isolated. Iceland is so isolated from Europe that the language didn't change all that much. There was some contact with like Danish, so we have like maybe Danish slang, words a bit. But nowadays with the globalization of the English language, you get a lot more of the, I don't know, you're getting more influences from English, and it's and we're talking about it during one of the teachers' meetings in the upper secondary school. So we're talking about year 16 till like 19.
Yeah.
So
that's
grades
called grades what?
there are no grades. It's like
okay.
but
Yeah.
so I think it's from like 16 years old to like 19 that people that are coming from the grunnskóli, so the elementary school and high school, because it's the same system. We don't
elementary to high school and then upper.
Yeah, so it's the
upper high school sort of. Yeah, because I think if you put this translate into like North American terms, school here goes like up to grade 15, but like those last few years are like optional. You don't have to complete them.
No. There's like you have grade 1 to 10. That's like the elementary school in our system, and then you have menntaskóli, which is from age 16 till 19. But we don't have grades. It's it's you just do the courses and you collect the courses.
That is optional. Like you can just do the till grade 10 and go out if you're gonna.
I think like it is required by law that you study until you're 18, but don't quote me on that one.
Sure.
So you either go for like trade school or like
I see. Yeah.
The bookish course.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's and that's like a whole different system in of itself with its own prejudices against. Well, I'm from the countryside, so I didn't really think too much of it, but there is a really, I would say, like elitism with like depending on which menntaskóli you went to.
I see, yeah.
Which is a really interesting thought because everyone ends up in the same university if they want to study here in Iceland.
Yeah.
Unless they're like in the north and they go to the University of Akureyri. But there is this sort of, and we talked about it in our courses in the university, the teaching university, that there is a certain like, if you're from this school, you're this sort of person, and so you're getting this sort of divide, and
which is very true in North America, and I find politics too, the presidential elections going on here in Iceland, and I find, oh wait a minute, like I always thought Iceland is like this small rational country and they avoid these certain things, but no, politics can get just as divided here, and then schooling and this sort of elitism and kind of divides in that perspective is just the same as it is elsewhere in the world too.
Well, I mean, there is this sort of like thinking, if you're really smart, you go to school X, but if you're like underachiever, then you go to the school Y. And another thing is like there is the school in Breiðholt, which has like majority of the kids that are foreign. Now, since we were talking about like the language, that there has been some failure in the system that has resulted in them basically not understanding Icelandic, like the phrase "hjartað dælir blóði," which means just like the heart pumps blood. They don't understand that. So, and that just if you want to go into like the policies, the educational policies of like school without separation is, in my opinion, kind of failed, because in like crowding those a lot of different kids together, not really tailoring their education to what
their
they need,
needs,
and it's just like a one size fit all. You're going to end up with students that just won't really fit into the system and won't fit into the Icelandic society. So then we have like maybe a polarization or like, but that's one of the problems. And they actually did like one of the, in Mývatn, there's like it's a big touristy town, so a lot of foreigners live there and work there, and they changed so politics in Iceland are usually performed in Icelandic, but in this small town they've changed it to English, just to accommodate the foreigners living there.
Yeah, interesting.
But here it is again. It's just it's nowadays we have to like think about what's the role of Icelandic in this globalized world, you know? Is it like just some sort of tribal language, or is it something that we're supposed to like try to keep alive? And that's it can go. Yeah, I have really strong opinions about it, which is just better left untold. But I think people will lose their roots if they disconnect from the language.
Yeah,
because language is how we access like the old sagas and like our Icelandic literature, which is a huge part of it. But then again, for me personally, it's I'm quite conflicted on how they should address this change, because we want to include these people in our society, but the educational system is failing them due to the policies of the government, and it's just these it's they just say do that and then they don't really follow up with it. So
right. Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and like you say, holding on to the language is how you stay connected to your roots. But I would also add, as a North American, that understanding the language, and my understanding is very, very small, but every time I unlock a bit more, or I learn this phrase or this saying, I feel like it unlocks a better understanding that I have of the culture and the people in general. And yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because, of course, as Iceland becomes a bit less of a homogenized society, which I think every society in the world becomes a bit more expansive. You get people coming there from different countries, or just you're using the internet or something. As you go into a more diverse world, of course, you need different tactics about how you do education and how you do work and how you do politics too, what languages you use and these sorts of things.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing. I've met people that originally came from like another place. They might be like first generation immigrants or second generation immigrants, and they speak the language just really well. I mean, of course there is, but that's just that's one of the things that just makes me so proud of being Icelandic, when the people that just take their time to like learn the language and just then that kind of integrates them into our society. I mean, I'm really proud when I took like a taxi cab home after a night on town, and it was this Afghanist cab driver, and he spoke perfect Icelandic, and we were just chatting, just really that's one of the times that I feel really proud of being Icelandic. Is that we get such an amazing people joining our society that integrates so well. But I mean, it's but then again, we also have these people that just can't learn the language, maybe due to lack in agency in learning it. I mean, it's not the easiest language to learn.
No, and there certainly is too learning disabilities as well. Like I could see, a possibility that someone like actually can't learn the language, like literally they just wouldn't be capable of doing. Then that's maybe true of any language. So there's also that factor. But then, like you say, I mean, well, I don't know. It takes a lot of time too, and it really is a big investment. Maybe that's something that gives you such pride when you meet someone who has learned and embraced the language, is like how much they've invested in that endeavor.
Yeah, I mean, in my eyes, they're like Icelanders because they learned the language. They're living here. They've like integrated so well. And I mean, and then that's when we come to like the question of like, what is an Icelander in a
and that's another 4 hours that people can stay tuned in as we discuss the deepest philosophy of what is an Icelander. So stay tuned for that. I mean, it is interesting, and these actually are the questions I think that most of us come to. It's funny, this whole like genealogical searching, connecting with relatives, discovering different cultures, and travel, I think it always like actually leads down to philosophy. Like underlying it, you start to ask these big why questions, and it does make you reflect on you yourself as a person. Like, who am I? you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. It's kind of, as you explore your heritage, you kind of get a new sense of yourself and like a new identity, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's...
And at the end of it all, we're all just human, and we're all trying to figure out the same things. So whether we're immigrating or leaving a place or joining a new place, learning a new language or forgetting an old language, you know, it's like no matter what you're doing, we're all just humans trying to figure out what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really nice way to put it.
Well, I think, you know, that does need perspective sometimes, because of course, and Iceland certainly wouldn't be unique in this regard, but cultures and communities, when they are integrating with different cultures and communities, there's often some friction, right? So there's, you know, not wanting change or not wanting a new language to be spoken or hanging on to an old belief or something like this. And there's always going to be these frictions. And I think whenever we meet that, before we can have like a discussion as to where we're going together, we need to just remember, wait a minute, we're all just human, we're all trying to figure it out. So let's put like national pride aside and these sorts of things and just start from that baseline.
Yeah, I mean, that's a, like I said, good way to
yes.
put it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, this is very good. We kind of went there naturally. I wanted to ask you questions about language learning. I guess maybe I could ask you specifically, like, when did you learn English? I assume it was in school, but if you could maybe talk a bit about that process.
Okay, so I started learning English when, like, in the 5th grade, so I would be around 9 or 10.
And is that usually
around that? Like, usually you start learning, nowadays it's like the 1st grade or the 2nd grade.
Yeah, or maybe even before if you're on YouTube or something.
Yeah, I mean, you get the... It's the question of like language acquisition and language learning. Like you acquire the language through like YouTube and the
music,
digital
movies.
media and culture that is so ruling nowadays. But yeah, so that was always like and I was an avid video game player back when I was young. So I had to like know what I was supposed to do, and I think I remember playing this game, and like the objective was to destroy the communication dish. And so I asked my father, like, what is a communication dish? And it's like, oh, it's like
like a satellite
satellite
radio tower.
Communication tower.
Yeah,
which was like, oh yeah, okay, that's the damn thing that I was supposed to destroy. I would like run around all the map trying to figure it out. So that was one of the fun ways how I learned English. But it was usually through video games, and it wasn't really until like my love of English literature happened in grade 8 when I started reading H.P. Lovecraft's works, and his prose is archaic. We're talking about really old. He decided to write in old prose when he was writing in the early 20th century, so around 1904. But he kind of, then it just like evolved from there. I started out as in like this, after elementary school, went to like menntaskóli, started out in like the business like the business department, but it ended up getting cancelled because we were only like 3 students there. So I decided to just pivot to languages. So I studied German and psychology. And English,
German and
of course.
psychology.
Yeah.
So did you read like Freud and Jung in German?
It wasn't as good as that. My German is really, I mean, it's fine. I can order hot dogs and stuff like that.
Oh, that's very important.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, and talking about learning languages, it's fun, but it's so hard. So that's why, like I said, I'm really proud when there are people that are actually taking the time and effort of learning the language. Because language is like a social thing, and you can't really, in my opinion, you can't really learn it in isolation. You have
Yeah.
to be connected to the community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Hmm. Did you also go through the Danish learning in school too?
Yeah, Danish was. Yeah, the Danish. Oof. Very good.
I get that response actually a lot from Icelanders. Maybe of your generation. I don't know if you're like parents' generation, where Danish was still a bit like ahead of English in terms of being
Yeah.
taught.
My parents actually speak better Danish than I do, but
Yeah.
in regards, I speak better English than my parents
Yeah,
do.
interesting.
So it's and here you can just see like how the emphasis has changed from the Danish to English in the sense that it's like the second language.
Yeah.
One could say. I mean, it's
Well, now it's taught and learned for multiple reasons. Before, as far as I understand, Danish was incorporated maybe because they, had a say in the curriculum when they were, involved before Iceland gained independence. But also it was because a lot of Icelanders were expected they would go off to university in Denmark, so knowing Danish was important for that reason. But now with English, it's like you may go study abroad through English, sure, but it's also, like you say, it's kind of just like the second language. There's going to be many tourists here speaking English, and of course the media, you're going to want to be able to know, what they're saying in the next new Hollywood movie or music and that sort of thing.
yeah, but there's also like the thing is that English is the language of the academia here in Iceland. Like you get these professors that know a lot about maybe geology and political sciences, and they are often not from abroad, so they're not going to be able to do the lectures in Icelandic, so they do it in English. So that's one of the things that have been like in the spotlight for a bit, is the role of Icelandic in the academia, because
yes.
we're getting to the point like in pedagogy that you have like they're talking about one thing in English, but you have maybe a couple of Icelandic translations of the same word because the books aren't being translated into Icelandic, so you get these thoughts, or not thoughts, like
Ideas, concepts lost in translation?
Yeah, ideas and concepts that they just don't have any Icelandic word for.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just one problem in it. So, and actually that's why English is such an important part of the curriculum, I think, is because if the students want to go and receive higher education, they're going to have a really good academic basis for their English to be able to learn it. But but it just depends. But a lot of, in Denmark they've done some changes to their university curriculum. Is that it's only taught in Danish or something? Don't quote me on that.
Sure, yeah. But maybe even some schools that might be a focus and others not. That would make sense. I could see that as like a sort of nationalist thing to maintain a language, and just say, we're just going to teach this in our native language. And again, this is complicated. I don't know what I would do in that situation. I've had some Icelanders tell me there's certain topics or concepts that they actually just find easier to think about and discuss in English. Yeah. So there's always, maybe the aspect of using the right language for the job, right? Some languages are better at explaining this versus another language, perhaps.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and it comes to like a sociological point, is that if you want, like, I don't know, maybe the term would be like, is it white-collared? Yeah, white-collared job.
Yeah.
You kind of need to speak the language. That's one of those institutional thing is, unless you're like an English teacher, then you can probably just work on. But I like, there are elements in Iceland that, or like occupation, that require you to speak the language, and that's just because maybe the top dogs or whatever, the management speaks Icelandic, but maybe not English. It's a whole political thing that I'm just...
Yeah, well, and on a personal level, I would feel like, you know, more and more recently, there's been like more opportunities and more of a pathway for a Canadian or American to like come here and work. And, you know, spending time as a traveler, going to these hostels in different places, I've encountered just on this trip people that, this one group at the cafe, they spoke Spanish, they're from Spain, and English. Didn't speak Icelandic, but they're working in the cafe. I mean, that works. They're in downtown Reykjavik, so they encounter a lot of tourists. And at the hostel, the guy working there was from Greece. He said, oh yeah, I just was here for like a week and got offered this job. I asked him if he knew Icelandic. He said no, and based on his answer, didn't really seem like he had any intentions of learning it. And so in those instances, it's okay, sure, you can seem like you can get by just fine. I personally would feel kind of embarrassed. Even if I wasn't encountering Icelanders, I would always have like this fear in the back of my mind. What if an Icelander comes and they only know Icelandic? I would hate to be that guy who's like, you know, ég tala bara ensku. I'm sorry, I just know English.
Yeah, that's when I was visiting France, I got that like embarrassment on not knowing the damn language.
Yeah.
And like, I just stayed so silent. I went to the bakery and just said un baguette, merci.
Yeah.
And just left it at that. I was not, because the French have like, it's a really interesting way how they do it.
Yes.
With their connection to the language, because, and I personally like how they are doing it, but it's pretty inhuman towards other people though. So
yeah, and it is difficult. I always say that being in Iceland speaking English is a blessing and a curse.
Yep.
It's a blessing because so many Icelanders, and actually in every situation, I still have yet to like go into a shop or something and not be able to do a transaction in English. So it's like so nice. I'm so grateful for that. But then it's a curse because since I'm not forced into like, okay, I can't order a coffee unless I learn it in Icelandic, then I always default to just using English. And I've been trying to, you know, get better with that and try to stick to Icelandic. But yeah, I mean, again, I think it's a blessing and a curse. A blessing because it's easy, but then a curse because it doesn't force that language out of necessity.
No, and I mean, I think it just depends also on, if you go think about it in like geopolitical terms, is like France was like an empire, and like Britain was an empire. So you got this like, I don't know, the sense of your language being
a piece of your empire.
Yeah, being
it's
like
a tool.
More important. And they have this like thought about like the inner circle, the expanding circle, and like the outer circle of like English language learning. But I don't know, there's always more emphasis put on like the colonizers' language rather than your own, and you see it in like the language policies in like French colonies that have the French administrative system, and they're like working in France. But it's I've been in a class with people from Ghana, and they seem to really just speaking English is really cool for them, and it's
certainly Canada represents this. It could have gone one of two ways: English or French being this sort of global dominant language. And certainly in Canada, you know, all of Quebec is a very large portion that's speaking French, but English is still like kind of that more cross-Canada dominant language and still kind of a step above.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing, like a classmate of mine was studying in Quebec when she was young. She had emigrated with her parents, and like she was forced into these French language schools to like learn the language, and it's just there you can just see so clearly how political language can be.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I understand that the Quebecians
Quebecois
are like yeah, I'm sorry, it sounds like a duck drunk or something. Quebecois. Okay,
Quebecois, yes.
that they want to
hang on to
because it's their heritage and
it's their heritage, and there is kind of that conflict, right? There's been many instances where Quebec was very close to just separating and becoming its own country.
Yeah, I mean they kidnapped was it like the British ambassador back in the 80s?
Mm-hmm.
We learned about that in
Did you guys go to Quebec?
No, but we went to like the Museum of Tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
Where they were talking about genocides and everything. I think in
Winnipeg, the Museum of Human Rights. Yeah.
So they had like a whole section, and I wanted so much to like stay there because that's a part of the history I've never heard about, like the Quebecan terrorists organization kidnapping the British ambassador and then just ending up killing him. It's like
you're actually right. This is another aspect in terms of like discovering North America. I don't think most foreigners are like understanding of these like tensions between Quebec and the rest of Canada. Things are like pretty level-headed now, but there's still like bad blood and stuff, and mostly it's represented through hockey teams and who you cheer for in hockey. But there's that whole aspect to history. This has all been relevant because again, this is your perspective going to North America as an Icelander. And you're right, like as we talk about these things, I realize there is so much to North American history. What I like about learning about Icelandic history is it's like relatively contained. You have like certain dates and time frames. There was only humans here in Iceland for so long. So it's kind of like, oh, wow, that's a relief. Whereas in North America and in Canada throughout my lifetime, when I was in, middle school and high school, the extent of education we got about the indigenous people in Canada only went so far. And then since then, there's constantly new information, either stories that were like actively suppressed or new archaeological evidence and different dots being connected. And it's really cool, but also very overwhelming. And it's like constantly I'm having to rethink Canadian history and dive deeper and deeper into the past to get an understanding and a sense of like what happened, who we are as a nation and the history to this land. Whereas you come to Iceland, you're like, oh, there's only been people here since 974 or whatever. Oh, that's fantastic. Even there, I think there is still some more mysteries, right? How long the Celtic monks were here. Before that is still kind of unknown. Did, the ancient Greeks actually see Iceland when they talked about Thule or Thule? So there's still mysteries, but it's a bit more contained that it's been like kind of a relief learning Icelandic history, whereas it's so overwhelming with North American history.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of get the sense that like history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
And I mean, there weren't that many conflicts in Iceland just between like Icelanders themselves. So it's, you don't have that, like you said, they're suppressing some part of the histories. And I remember when I was in like Gimli, there was like this huge talk about like the native Americans.
This is also complicated. So in the United States and many places they still call them Indians, which I think is just so confusing, especially in a global sense. Or Native Americans, or what's a more accepted term now is just call them indigenous people.
Indigenous people, with like the Christian schools and everything. And
Yes, going to
morality rate
residential schools and just being ripped away from their culture. And it's a really horrible history. And that's just come out more and more. Like when I was in school, we weren't actually really learning about the residential schools, whereas now we have this whole day to honor that Truth and Reconciliation Day, where that is the focus of it. But as we maybe get close to wrapping up here, I want to pivot a bit and ask you about something personally, but also does connect to your culture too. Okay. So you recently published a book.
Oh shit!
And that upholds the stat. I don't know how true or accurate this is. That 1 in 10 Icelanders will publish a book in their lifetime. So maybe this is. You also mentioned at the beginning of this chat your grandfather published a book too. So. Maybe you can just talk a bit about the approach of writing books, publishing books, and how Icelanders such as yourself view and approach that?
So we've been talking about like the the role of Icelandic as a language, and here's the thing: the book is based on my master thesis that I did in the English.
Uh-huh.
It's not in Icelandic.
Oh, interesting.
So that's why I'm like, well, you really
well, this is an interesting turn. Yeah, so
under the bus there, you know, we're talking about being good Icelandic
and having
voice.
pride in your native language.
And then it's just, oh yeah, you wrote a book in
Well, that's really fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, it was my master thesis in university, and I have a friend, Gabriel Dunsmith, who helped me edit the book. So he was my editor during that period, and it went through a lot of drafts, because one of the things, it's when you're like writing in a language that isn't your own, it's challenging. You have to get like the nuances correct, and there are like these words that you like have to figure out, and it was a really fun process of going through it. And just going through with publishing a damn book, because it takes a while and a lot of hard work.
Even in a nation where so many people will publish a book, it's not necessarily an easier process here than elsewhere in the world.
No, I mean, I decided, because the problem is, if you're like publishing an English book, I went to during my time in the English program, we went to see like a publisher, Forlagið, and they are it's a big no-no from them to publish English books written by Icelanders, because there will be this, they don't grasp the language as well as their own. So, but here's the thing, I'm kind of born into the culture when English is becoming like more and more dominant, and like I said, I read more English books than I have Icelandic, which is like...
Right, you're like right on that generation where it has been this kind of major shift to a lot of...
Yeah, for me personally, the stories written in English had more connection to me rather than the Icelandic books. Okay. The Icelandic books were, I would not say bad, but they didn't speak to
interest
me.
You at
they
the
didn't
time.
interest me.
Same way, sure.
Like, I'm a huge science fiction fan. There weren't a lot of science fiction books written in Icelandic. There are some now, but back in the day, not really.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of just pivot into like the Lovecraftian horror, which is science fiction horror. But that's the thing about English. You have this such a wide variety of content to read, books to read, and the history of it always just sounded so much more interesting to me than my own, like some guy writing a poem about, you know, the grass or something, and then you go to William Wordsworth writing poems about lilies, and it's like it's the same thing. But yeah, so my book, written in English, and I decided just to self-publish it, because why the hell not?
And this self-published through Amazon?
Like I did special edition printed copies, and then I tried to do it through Amazon, but my failure was just I'm not really good with advertising. Okay. But I managed to. There's only one book left in stock of those that I printed out, so I'm quite happy with how it went. So, but here's the thing: there have been Icelandic authors, and there was this one man who wrote in Danish, and he got like he got called out on it. So I think no, it's like I said, it was my project in English, but it was just I wanted to challenge myself and see if I could do it, and the end result was really a beautiful book written by me about but here's the thing though, we have some, I would say, like Norse connection to it, like the monster that is based on a known monster in like Norse mythology.
Mm-hmm.
So there are these,
Crossover connections, yeah.
yeah, connections. If you can read into like what it's supposed
Sure.
to
Yeah,
metaphor
yeah,
and
yeah.
whatever, but
Hmm.
yeah, so
Yeah, always a metaphor in everything. Metaphors on top of metaphors.
yeah, so I wrote the book. I self-published it, tried it on Amazon, and it should be there.
Okay. Well, yes, you could tell us the title if you're interested and watch a flood of book sales come in with our diligent audience. Or you can also keep it to yourself, too.
No, I mean, if people want to like take a look, it's on Amazon called Into the Storm of Darkness.
Into the Storm of Darkness.
If you feel like it's kind of an exploration on themes of what would happen if you would find like the remnant of well, I told you, like
Yes.
the atomic bomb on another planet, and like the last remains of a long lost civilization. It's a fun read.
How many pages is it?
It's not a long read. It's around 196 pages.
Okay. And you mentioned this was this project your thesis, or was it based on an idea that you put forth?
No, so my thesis was this book, and then afterwards I did like a couple of more drafts just to like polish it off. And I mean, that's like the version that I have up now is like I just skipped work. I just I said adios, I need to finish this.
Yeah.
So I started at 2 p.m. and ended my like rewriting session at 3 a.m. So it was a long day of me going over the text and just like yes.
And
Yeah.
then how do you know to say yes, this is complete? Right? That I think is such a like. How do you know when something is done, or do you just know? Does it speak to you?
That's the thing. Like, and it's going to sound really silly, but I had nightmares. I had nightmares when I sent like I wanted the copies to be printed out. That I did some like maybe mistyped a few words. Yeah. That was horrible dreams, nightmares. That's.
Yeah, okay. Well, this has been a really great conversation, so I thank you very much for doing this with me here and sharing all of these ideas and personal experiences and philosophies and stuff like this with us here at Icelandic Roots. Is there anything else you would like to mention? Any thank yous to specific people or something like that, or maybe if you want to recite some Icelandic poetry about grass or something like this, the table is yours here.
Okay, I mean, I did write like a really weird haiku about a tractor, so I might see if I can find it. But yeah, perhaps one of the reasons that I decided to write in English, and that's just personal. I mean, it was that English is such a universal language that my writing would be able to connect with more people than if I were to write in Icelandic. So that was, I think, one of the reasons that I decided to write it in English instead of Icelandic. Plus, having spent so much time in learning English and being
immersed in it.
I'm having. I often have to like look up in the dictionary the Icelandic translation of an English word that I know, and it's just because being part of the academia in Iceland is that you have to like sell your soul to the devil to
sell your soul to the English.
Yeah. Okay, tractor poem. Yeah, you had some tractor poems, right?
Yeah.
I think it was on my other phone that got destroyed. I'm afraid. Maður á traktor, engin kona í kringum hann, hamingja. It was in this, but it just revolves around that. My friend Gabe sent me like a picture of a guy. No, it was on a forklift. I really like forklifts.
Okay.
They're like one way to pick up things. But yeah, he showed me a picture of a guy on a forklift, and I just wrote this. Yeah. Just the happiness of a man being able to just work on his forklift.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that's a... If it is...
It's poetic.
Yeah.
Well, that is very Icelandic of you.
Yeah, I would just want to thank the people that volunteered when I was in the States and Canada. It was like they made sure that we had a really good time back there. And like if people want to check out my book, you can find it on Amazon, Into the Storm of Darkness by Sigfús Haukur Sigfússon. Yeah, so I just want to thank the listeners for listening for so long, and also yet again to reiterate, I just want to thank the people that hosted us, me and Erla, during our time in the States and Canada. It really warms your heart.
Yeah. And looking forward to the future. So
Yep.
Thank you very much.